Crossing the land of Carrot, Charlie originally only wanted to become a caravan guard who managed food and shelter, without having to settle down like those adventurers. But an attack that occurred late at night disrupted the peaceful life, and Charlie could only venture through the crisis-ridden and treacherous continent of Carrot with his hack system. From there. Chapter 1. A humorous opening. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey Charlie, wake up. A wave of shaking and shouting woke Charlie from his slumber, and he slowly opened his eyes to see an unfriendly face with a big beard. Ah. The unfriendly thing here is not his expression, but his face. He looks very fierce, and the anxious expression on his face adds a touch of disgust. What's wrong? Charlie rubbed his sleepy eyes, sat up, and asked Big Beard. The camp is surrounded by bandits outside. Pick up your weapons and personal belongings quickly and rush out with me. Big Beard said anxiously, then got up and rushed outside. Charlie was startled by his words and his drowsiness dissipated instantly. He almost jumped out of bed, picked up the long sword placed next to him, and rushed out. Charlie had just rushed out when he saw a person's throat pierced by arrows flying towards him. He covered the wound that was constantly spraying blood outwards and stumbled to the ground. Charlie was slightly surprised, but he didn't pay attention to the person who had fallen and continued to charge outside. After he rushed out, he saw many faint figures swaying outside the camp in the darkness. Dozens of people dressed in various outfits had already entered the camp, fighting against the awakened caravan guards. The air was filled with a strong smell of blood, and the cries of women and children gradually dissipated into the distance. Charlie. Let's go. They're killing in. Just now, Big Beard stood next to a carriage not far away and shouted loudly towards Charlie. His voice was easily drowned out by the noise around him, but fortunately Charlie still heard his shout. He quickly ran towards Big Beard with his long sword in hand. But he had just taken a few steps when suddenly a black shadow came from the side. Charlie instinctively raised his sword and slashed, only hearing a crisp sound. A rusty short sword was actually thrown away by him, and the bandit across from him covered his numb wrist with a shocked look. Before the bandit could react, Charlie raised his sword and slashed, leaving a deep, visible, and terrifying wound on his chest. Later, Charlie quickly ran towards Big Beard. When he ran to Big Beard's side, the shouts of killing around him had become even more intense. The caravan was guarding and retreating, and as they were about to be defeated, Big Beard stuffed the reins into Charlie's hand and said, "Get on your horse, follow me closely." As soon as he finished speaking, Big Beard flipped over and mounted his horse, charging towards the direction where there were fewer bandits. Charlie gritted his teeth and followed suit, riding on the horse and charging out. In the morning, Charlie leaned against the trunk of a towering tree in the sky, his gaze somewhat dull. Big Beard sat opposite him, wiping the blood from his sword and remained silent. They are all dead. After a while, the Huzi finally held back such a sentence. I just went to see it, and everyone was dead and the goods were all looted. Our employer, Mr. Anders, has a big hole in his stomach and even his intestines are bleeding all over the ground. Beard said with some sadness. He even said before leaving that he would go to Polos to see his newborn grandson after completing this business trip. Now it seems that he has no chance. Charlie fell silent upon hearing this. Anders took him in when he was lost after his journey, giving him the opportunity to learn horsemanship and swordsmanship. Although he was even more greedy than a capitalist, Charlie was still grateful to him. The two of them remained silent for a while, but in the end, Big Beard broke the silence again. He said, "Charlie, the caravan is over, and I'm also going home." "Where are you going?" "Am I?" Charlie was lost in thought. He was not a native of this world, but a traveler who had traveled to this world 6 months ago. He had no family in this world and was completely alone. I still remember when he first traveled, just like the classic beginning, he walked alone in the dim streets and alleys. After a fierce battle, he killed the bandits who intended to rob him, awakened the horse riding and slashing system, and was rescued by Mr. Andes, who happened to pass by when he was lost. From then on, he joined his caravan and became a caravan guard. Charlie lowered his head and pondered for a long time before lifting his head again, saying, "I'm planning to venture outside. As you know, I'm alone and carefree, perfect for becoming an adventurer with no fixed abode." All right, Big Beard said with some regret, "since you have decided, let's go our separate ways starting today. I hope we have another day to see each other." Charlie nodded and gave Big Beard a heavy hug before watching them ride away. After Big Beard left, he let out a long sigh and instinctively called out the ride chop system. Charlie Davis, 23 years old, family. Davis character level. LV10 vitality. 14, great, you have a slightly stronger physique than the average person, I believe this will help you in battle, control. 5, your control over your body is not very strong, even if you place the target 10 meters in front of you, you may miss the target, yes, you are such a weak chicken, endurance. 5, oh my god, let me see who has such poor endurance, I hope it won't affect your endurance in any aspect. Cunning. 4, come on, the word cunning is completely irrelevant to you. You are someone who cannot lie, listen to me, that's right, social skills. 8, your social skills can only be said to be barely strong. I hope you won't get beaten up for saying a wrong sentence at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, intelligence. 9, it's just a normal person's intelligence, I believe you still have room for improvement, after all, you don't want to become what others say is a simple-minded man with well-developed limbs, do you? Skills, proficiency. Vitality. 100 for one hand, 23 for both hands, and 60 for long sticks control. Bow 34, crossbow 12, throw 50 endurance. Riding 90, running 90, forging 0 cunning. Investigation 45, tactics 57, rogue habits 25 social. Charm 80, dominance 50, trading 42 intelligence. Management 49, medical 0, engineering 10. This is Charlie's personal attribute. From those values in parentheses, it can be seen that his body is not very good. After awakening the riding and chopping system at the beginning, following the principle of reducing 10 points with one force, he added all the points to his vitality. His later experiences proved that his choice was the right one. His extraordinary strength saved him some hardships in his future life in a different world. Last night, in the battle against the suddenly killed robber, he directly swung the opponent's short sword, which was a manifestation of his extraordinary strength. After reading the system panel, Charlie silently closed the interface and turned to check his personal belongings. Due to his hurried departure, he didn't take many things with him. His armor was only a patch of soft armor, and his weapons were a long sword and 4 flying knives that he had been practicing using recently. Then, with the 56 dinars tied in the wallet round his waist and the traveling horse tied to a tree not far away, this was all his belongings. This is even more embarrassing than the beginning of the game, at least there are 1,000 dinars left in the game. Chapter 2. Ricardon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Charlie left this temporary resting grove, he took a risk to return to the place where the caravan had camped yesterday to repay Mr. Anders for taking him in. He found the body of Mr. Anders, who had died tragically, and dug a pit for him as a grave, which could be buried for safety. Returning to the campsite was not just for burying Mr. Anders, but he also fantasized that the robbers had not taken all of their belongings. He searched the campsite and had to admit that these robbers were as poor as 8 lifetimes, even removing the silver teeth from their bodies, let alone other valuable things. Helpless, Charlie could only leave here on a traveling horse and head to the nearest city, Karen. Ricardon, the capital of the Southern Empire, was a bustling city where caravans from all over the country entered and exited the city gates every day. Adventurers who dreamed of achieving success roamed the city, searching for opportunities to make a fortune. After paying the entry tax of 1 dinar to the guards guarding the city gate, Charlie led a traveling horse and followed the crowd into the city of Ricardon. As soon as you enter the city, you will be greeted by bustling streets and crowds jostling against each other. Standing tall by the victory pillar in the pool, many civilians wearing various robes sit on wooden chairs chatting, while vendors carrying burdens stand on the street pushing their goods to passers-by. From time to time, you can see guards chasing thin and agile young men like loaches in the crowd. A person dressed as an adventurer holding a traveling horse like Charlie is not uncommon in the city, and passers-by also look normal. They just looked at Charlie curiously before retracting their gaze and continuing to do what was in front of them. Charlie looked at the scene in front of him, feeling a bit confused for a moment. He didn't know where to go. This was the first time he had come to a city alone since crossing the river, although he had come to the city of Ricardon several times with the caravan before. After standing in place for a while, Charlie finally realized. He led his traveling horse towards the city and headed towards the direction of his usual tavern. After walking a distance, he saw the guard who had just chased the boy panting and escorting the dejected boy over. The guard cursed while escorting the boy. "Damn thief, how many times have I caught you? Don't try to escape this time." The young man had a face full of tears and a look of resignation, but just as he walked past Charlie, he suddenly pounced on the traveling horse he was holding and punched its buttocks hard. The traveling horse was startled, raised its front hooves, and let out a hissing sound, causing everyone around to panic and disperse. The young man took the opportunity to rush towards the crowd and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When the horse was startled, the guard stepped forward to help Charlie pull the reins to prevent the traveling horse from getting out of control. When he regained his senses, he realized that the thief had actually escaped. Damn it! He cursed in frustration, ignoring Charlie and his traveling horse, and chased towards the direction where the thief had disappeared. Charlie watched helplessly as the two of them left, gently comforting the traveling horse to calm its emotions, and then led the horse towards the tavern. After passing through a few blocks, Charlie finally arrived at the tavern called Scarlet Girl. Although the tavern was called Scarlet Girl, the owner was a burly man of all ages, and it was said that he still had half of the Patanese bloodline. Charlie tied his traveling horse to a wooden stake outside the tavern and walked into it. Although it was still daylight, the tavern was still bustling with people. Many guests were already drunk, boasting loudly with their big tongues, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of various flavors mixed together, creating a foul atmosphere. Passing through the drunken guests, Charlie walked straight to the counter. The boss was standing behind the counter, wiping the wooden wine glass with a dirty cloth that had not been washed for a long time. Seeing someone approaching, he instinctively lifted his leg and recognized Charlie in an instant. "Hey, aren't you Mr. Anders' subordinate? Why are you alone?" he asked. "We were attacked in the wilderness and they all died," Charlie said in a low voice. "Are you all dead?" The expression on the boss's face immediately froze. He silently put down his glass and said, "This damn world is full of murderous bandits, and death is also inevitable." After finishing speaking, he picked up a wine jug filled with ale and poured it into a wooden glass. Then he pushed the glass towards Charlie and said, "Let's have one, I'll take this one." Charlie looked at the glass that had been wiped with a dirty cloth, and his mouth twitched. He didn't refuse the other person's kindness, but picked up the glass and drank it all in one gulp, feeling the bitterness of the ale in his mouth and the sweetness that slowly lingered. "So where are you going next?" the boss looked at him and asked. "I don't know either. Find Shuyu on www.zhaoshuyuan.com, Charlie put down his glass and shook his head with a bitter smile. "I think like most adventurers, we might start with mercenaries. Since you want to become a mercenary, I have a job here that I can introduce to you." "I wonder if you're interested," the boss said. "What?" "There is a merchant from Fekawang in the city whose younger brother was kidnapped by a group of robbers. He urgently needs to recruit manpower to rescue his brother. If you have any ideas, I can introduce you to him. He is currently living in the innermost room on the second floor." After speaking, the boss hesitated and looked at Charlie again, saying, "But you're the only one. Merchants probably won't take notice of you. Coincidentally, there's a competition going on in the city recently. I suggest you also participate in the competition. No matter what ranking you get, first make yourself famous." Competitive competitions. Charlie's mind is moving slightly. Competitive competitions are a necessary channel for quickly obtaining good equipment and making money in the early stages of the game. The prizes in competitive competitions are diverse, including weapons, armor, and horses. If you encounter something worth tens of thousands of dinars, you can sell it directly and no longer have to worry about money. With this in mind, Charlie looked up at the boss with a determined gaze and said, "Okay, I will attend. Thank you for your reminder." The boss just smiled slightly, shrugged and brought back the glass Charlie had just drunk. He then picked up the black cloth that had not been washed for a long time and wiped it on top of the glass. Charlie couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his mouth when he saw this. It was hard for him to imagine how many people's saliva was on the cloth. He took a deep breath, pretended not to see it, took out 2 dinars from his pocket, and patted them on the counter, saying, "This is today's allowance. Please arrange a room for me." Chapter 3. Competitive Competition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Perhaps due to the holding of the competitive competition, there were people coming and going inside and outside the circular arena in the city, excitedly discussing the strength and bravery of the participants. Some clever vendors took the opportunity to sell goods to passers-by outside the arena, making a big profit. In the arena, nobles and merchants dressed in exquisite robes walked up to the high-level viewing platform surrounded by attendants. From this viewing platform, they could clearly see the panoramic view of the contestants fighting in the arena, not to mention the many delicious snacks and wines prepared in the viewing platform, allowing them to enjoy delicious food while watching. Charlie followed the crowd into the arena and registered with the owner of the arena one day in advance. The owner of the arena was a middle-aged man with a big belly. He just glanced at Charlie, who was strong, and then nodded to record his name, asking him to participate on time the next day. When entering the arena, Charlie accidentally heard rumors about the contestants and prizes. Although he didn't hear them very clearly, he still vaguely heard a skilled nobleman in the city planning to participate in this competitive competition. Princess Ira, the heir of the Southern Empire, sponsored this competition, and the prize was a one-handed long sword named Ambassador. Although he was somewhat disappointed that the prize was not armor, Charlie did not intend to give up on this competition. Just as he was about to go to the contestants' locker room, a person walked towards him and stopped him. "Orig. Why are you here?" Charlie looked at the person and asked curiously. Orig is the owner of the tavern. He has a calm personality and usually stays in the tavern. His sudden appearance here did surprise Charlie. "Aren't you coming to compete?" "I'll cheer for you," Orig chuckled as he introduced the woman standing behind him to Charlie. "This is my wife, Antonia." Antonia nodded and smiled at Charlie, who also responded. Orig continued, "I've learned about it. There's a nobleman and a famous champion participating in this competitive competition, so those people basically bet on both of them. If you're confident in winning, betting on yourself will definitely help you make a big profit." Charlie was a bit tempted upon hearing this, but his expression collapsed when he thought of his empty wallet and said, "Unfortunately, I'm short of money and can only miss this opportunity to get rich." "Are you very confident about that?" Orig asked. Charlie nodded, recalling his greater strength than an ordinary person. The saying goes, one force reduces 10 times, and with the experience of escorting caravans and fighting robbers in the past 6 months, he has a 90% confidence. Seeing Charlie's confidence in himself, Orig thought for a moment and said, "Then I'll trust you once. I'll bet on you. If you win, I'll give you 30%. Upon hearing him say this, Charlton glanced at him with some surprise, but he did not refuse. He nodded and agreed, then chatted with Orig for a few more words before walking towards the contestants' locker room. Today is the first round of competition, with 16 contestants divided into 2 matches in the morning and afternoon. Charlie was assigned to the afternoon match, so he was present in the appearance battle all morning. The intense fighting on the field was no less than his previous battle with the robbers. Even though all weapons were passivated, many people were seriously injured and carried down. In the afternoon, Charlie's team was finally able to play, along with 7 other contestants. The 8 contestants were divided into 4 teams: yellow, green, red, and blue. Charlie and a cavalry member who played in the Imperial Army were assigned to the red team. After changing into a red jersey in the changing room, Charlie and his teammates walked into the arena carrying unopened swords and shields. The other 3 teams, like them, were all equipped with swords and shields. As the contestants entered, the atmosphere in the audience suddenly became lively. The arena manager used a specially designed loudspeaker to loudly introduce the names and origins of the contestants to the audience. Anyone who was named raised their iron sword and gestured to the audience. Charlie noticed that when the person in charge read a Pedanian named Otto, the audience present reacted even more fiercely. They fervently shouted Otto's name, and Otto also propped up his small mountain-like muscles, striking the shield with an iron sword, emitting a painful roar in his eardrums. After the person in charge finished the introduction, they personally rang the gong and the competition officially began. Charlie and his teammates were strangers, so they didn't cooperate, and the other teams were the same, each fighting their own way and actively finding the person closest to him. However, a few people seemed to realize Otto's difficulty and looked at each other, deciding to jointly confront Otto and eliminate him from the field. Otto seemed accustomed to such treatment, fearlessly welcoming a few people. He was like a furious bull rushing towards the closest contestant, who quickly raised his shield to block Otto's attack. However, he underestimated Otto's impact and found Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com where 2 shields collided head-on. With a deafening roar, the contestant was knocked out by Otto and fell heavily to the ground, almost losing breath. Charlie was shocked by Otto's strength with just one glance. He quickly withdrew his gaze and, before the enemy in front of him swung his iron sword towards him, raised his shield to block it. He then focused all his strength on his left arm and struck the opponent with a heavy shield. The contestant who was facing Charlie was about to withdraw their weapon after being blocked in the attack, when he hit him heavily with a shield and let out a groan. He took a few steps back, but before he could react, Charlie raised his iron sword and swung it towards the exposed center gate of the contestant. Although the iron sword was not opened, forcefully chopping on a person would still cause great pain to the opponent. The contestant let out a scream and fell down, losing their combat effectiveness. After killing one person, Charlie looked in the direction of his teammate again, but was shocked to find that his teammate had already been lying on the ground at some point, groaning in pain, and there was still a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. Charlie didn't know what to say for a moment. Could it be that he got used to horseback riding and pulled his hips in infantry combat? At this moment, a yellow figure suddenly rushed from behind him. Although Charlie's mind was focused on his fallen teammate in the distance, he still keenly sensed the movement behind him. He quickly turned around and protected himself with a shield. The next second, the yellow player collided head-on with Charlie's shield. Charlie sank down and gritted his teeth, directly lifting the yellow team player along the shield, flipping it heavily and falling to the ground. The yellow team player was thrown into a mess for a while, and before he could get up from the ground, Charlie inserted his weapon into the sand and struck the person's face with a heavy punch. Chapter 4. Winning in Round 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After dealing with 2 enemies on Charlie's side, there were only him, the Padani otter, and a blue team swordsman left on the field. The 3 of them stood in one direction, vigilantly watching each other. Under the gaze of the other 2, Charlie picked up the iron sword of the swordsman he had defeated, inserted it into the scabbard of his waist, and then pulled out his own sword from the ground, holding it in his hand. No one acted recklessly, and after the 3 of them faced off for a while, the audience outside began to become impatient, booing and expressing their dissatisfaction. The swordsman of the blue team couldn't hold back at first. He approached Charlie's direction without any intention of attacking him, but shouted to Charlie, "We can't defeat Otto alone. Let's work together to defeat him first, and then decide the winner in a dignified manner. How about that?" Charlie didn't immediately agree. He cautiously scrutinized Otto, who had defeated several contestants. At this moment, he was slightly panting. He was nearly 2 meters tall, standing in front of Charlie like a small mountain, full of pressure. Charlie can be certain that if he fights alone, the chance of defeating Otto is less than half, so working with the blue swordsman is the best choice. If the blue swordsman can actively propose cooperation, it proves that he is a smart person, and the chance of backstabbing Charlie is not high. If Charlie is defeated by Otto, he cannot win. Thinking of this, Charlie nodded at the person and said, "Cooperate, I'll attack the left, you attack the right, go up." At the end of the conversation, Charlie rushed out like a cheetah, and just as he reached a consensus with the blue swordsman, the audience outside the field shouted out in dissatisfaction, supporting Otto's belief that this was unfair behavior. The gambler who placed the bet on Otto also cursed the two of them. But the arena manager does not intend to intervene, and temporary cooperation between players is allowed, and they will not interfere excessively. Charlie was not affected by the external shouting. As he rushed towards Otto, Yu Guang saw the blue team swordsman also rushing forward. He took the initiative to swing his iron sword and attack Otto. Otto only thought for a moment before deciding to deal with the guy who killed the two first. He let out a roar, concentrating all his strength on the shield, and rushed towards Charlie like a bull. Charlie still remembered the fate of the player who was first knocked away by him. He quickly dodged Otto's charge, and the iron sword in his hand swung backwards towards Otto's side. Otto, however, showed agility that was completely out of line with his physique. Before the iron sword struck him, he turned around and blocked it with a shield. With a muffled bang, the iron sword was blocked by the shield. But then, Otto raised his iron sword in his right hand and fiercely struck Charlie. Charlie could even hear the sound of the iron sword swinging towards him, and he had no doubt that if he were to block it with his physical body, he would definitely lie in bed for 10.5 days. Therefore, he quickly raised his shield to block it, only hearing a loud bang. His left hand, holding the shield, felt the tremendous impact of the shield's backlash, and his tiger's mouth became numb, almost unable to hold the shield. He also took several steps back to stabilize. Hiss. "This guy's strength is too strong," Charlie muttered inwardly. Looking at the shield again, several cracks even appeared at the location of the attack. At this moment, the blue swordsman took advantage of the battle between Charlie and Otto and circled behind him, swinging towards Otto's unguarded back. Although Otto was aware of it, it was already too late, and the unsheathed iron sword struck heavily on his body. Even though he had rough skin and thick flesh, he couldn't help but let out a painful groan. Subsequently, the pain plunged Otto into anger. He let out another roar and turned to attack the blue team swordsman. The blue team swordsmen were not as strong as Charlie. Although he also raised his shield to block it, he was immediately hit by the huge recoil and fell to the ground, his tiger mouth ruptured, bleeding profusely, and he couldn't lift his hand for a moment. Otto was about to take advantage of his victory and chase after the person who had hurt him, but just as he raised his iron sword, a piercing sound suddenly sounded in the back of his head. Before he could turn his head to look, the back of his head was suddenly hit hard, and Otto felt his eyes black. His small mountain-like body shook and he fell on his back. After Otto fell, a shattered shield also scattered on the ground. It turned out that Charlie used his own shield as a dart and threw it vigorously. With the help of his strength, the edge of the shield wrapped in iron hit Otto's back of the head, knocking him unconscious. Suddenly, the entire arena was in a state of uproar, with excited spectators standing up and expressing their emotions towards the arena. Those who had placed all their bets on Otto were crying and cursing loudly. The nobles on the viewing platform couldn't help but frown, but they didn't react as fiercely as the lower class. Amidst the cheers of the audience, Charlie stepped on the fainting body of Otto and walked up to the blue team swordsman. He looked down at the collapsed swordsman sitting on the ground, his left hand trembling uncontrollably. He looked for the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com and gently uttered a sentence. "Give up, or I can help you give up." The blue team swordsmen shrank their necks in fear and quickly threw away their weapons, saying, "I give up, I give up." As the words of the blue swordsman fell, the arena referee struck the gong heavily and announced loudly, "The first round of the competition is over. I announce that Charlie Davis and his red team from out of town will advance. Damn it, this is a disgraceful victory. Damn it, I invested all my money in Otto, this damn Botanian barbarian, causing me to be penniless. Damn it, damn it." Amidst the curses of the audience, the first round of the game came to an end. When Charlie walked out of the locker room, the Origs were already waiting outside, and his eyes were filled with surprise as he looked at Charlie. Arigra held Charlie's hand and whispered in surprise, "Charlie, you're just unbelievable to me. I put 500 dinars on you, and according to a 4-to-1 odds, I won 2,000 dinars. Charlie was also surprised. He didn't expect there to be so much, so he quickly asked, "Can you get the money?" "Not yet," Orig shook his head and said, "They said they can only get it after the competition is over." After speaking, he smiled again and pulled Charlie out, saying, "I didn't expect gambling to be so easy to earn. Let's go. Tonight I'll treat you, and we'll celebrate your victory." The three of them walked a distance, but were stopped by someone. Charlie recognized each other's identity, and the arena manager stood in front of them with a smile, saying to Charlie, "Mr. Davis, I'm wondering if you're available. Our boss wants to see you once." Chapter 5. Noble Entrustment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Charlie asked the Orig couple to wait outside for a while before following the person in charge towards the upper level of the arena. As he walked, Charlie asked the person in charge, "How could your boss want to see me?" "Mr. Davis, your performance on the field was excellent. Not only did you easily defeat 2 players, but you also knocked out last year's champion Otto with a shield. It is said that he is still lying down and hasn't woken up." The person in charge replied, "So, someone is very interested in you." Someone. Charlie noticed this title, and just as he wanted to further inquire, the person in charge stopped in front of a door. With his fingers bent, he lightly tapped the door panel a few times and said, "Sir, Mr. Davis is here. Come on in." A vague voice came from the room, and the person in charge immediately pushed the door open, but he didn't follow in. Instead, he turned around and made a gesture of invitation to Charlie, saying, "Mr. Davis, please come in." Charlie nodded and walked into the room. The bloated boss he had seen before was sitting behind a desk. He noticed that there was also a man dressed in luxurious clothes sitting on the sofa, and behind him stood a tall man with a sword at his waist. Charlie only glanced and knew that the man's military might was not simple. After Charlie entered, the boss stood up and walked around the desk towards him, introducing him to him, "Mr. Davis, let me introduce you. This is His Excellency Patier from the patrol family. In fact, he wants to see you." Sure enough. Charlie's mind twitched slightly, and he noticed this as soon as he entered the room. If the boss wanted to see him, the person in charge wouldn't use the term, "someone," and there shouldn't be such a noble-looking person in the room. Thinking to himself, Charlie took the initiative to bow to Patier and said, "Respected Lord Patier, it is a great honor to be summoned by you." Patier smiled and nodded, saying, "Davis, I won't say anything else. I called you here because there is a transaction I want to entrust to you. I think you will be very interested." "What is it?" Charlie asked. Patier didn't speak directly. He made a gesture to the man behind him, and the man showed a knowing expression. He said to Charlie with a stern face, "In this competition, Pagarios from the Vitranes family also signed up and won the morning competition. Patier didn't want to see Pagarios become the final champion. As long as you can eliminate Pagarios in the next competition, Patier will give you a generous reward. Charlie frowned, but he didn't immediately agree. Instead, he asked in response, "Lord Patier, why do you think I can confront Lord Pagarios? The purpose of Pagarios is to win the championship, and he will definitely use any means to win." Patier sneered, "I have seen your abilities and I am sure you can defeat other players and advance all the way. As long as you can encounter Pagarios and defeat him, I will give you 5,000 dinars as a reward. How about that? 5,000 dinars. This is indeed a very generous figure for Charlie, who currently has a body weight of no more than 100 dinars, but it is unwise to offend a powerful nobleman for this 5,000. Just as Charlie was lost in thought, Patier seemed to notice his hesitation and said, "You don't have to worry about Pagarios getting back at you. Once the competition is over, my people will send you out of Ricardon. As long as you go to another city, Pagarios has no way to deal with you." Upon hearing Patier's words, Charlie gritted his teeth and decided to accept it. With 500 dinars in his arms, Charlie walked out of the arena and met with the Orig couple who had been waiting outside for a long time. Orig noticed the hesitation on his face, but did not ask much. Instead, he grabbed his shoulder and said, "Let's go back to the tavern. I have already sent someone to prepare a table of good wine and dishes in advance. The merchant of Phakeon has heard about your performance today and expressed his desire to see you. You can take his commission tonight." Charlie nodded, but he realized that if he had completed Patier's task, he would definitely have to leave Ricardon after the competition, and the task of the Phakeon merchant would probably be a bit difficult. "I can only go and inquire about it first." Charlie thought to himself and followed Orig back to his tavern. Perhaps because the sky was getting darker, it was the best time for the residents of Ricardon to relax during the day. When they returned to the tavern, there were already many guests, almost every table was filled, and the bartender and maids carrying plates were shuttling through the crowd. From time to time, the laughter of men and the coquettishness of women could be heard, creating a lively atmosphere throughout the tavern. On a table near the counter, a man with a worried expression who was looking for a book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com to drink and drink on his own caught Charlie's attention. The man's attire and attire were out of place with the people around him, and his clothing quality was clearly better than those around him. Orig's subsequent introduction to that person also proved Charlie's hypothesis. "This is the merchant Orpheus from Phakeon." I saw Orig walk straight up to the man, greet Charlie to sit down, and introduce him to his identity. The man looked up melancholically at Charlie, then continued to lower his head and drank the ale in his glass. Charlie sat obediently in front of Orpheus, and he introduced himself, "Orpheus, my name is Charlie Davis, and I am an adventurer." "Adventurers," Orpheus said without looking up, "I see young people who call themselves adventurers like you every year. They fantasize about making achievements on this chaotic continent, but in reality, they are not much different from the mercenaries of those vultures who smell the smell of carrion." Charlie didn't feel angry about the derogatory remarks in his words. He said, "I heard from Orig that you have encountered some difficulties. You can talk to me, maybe I can help you solve them." "You." Orpheus finally raised his head, his cheekbones protruding and his eyes sunken, looking very haggard. "I see you're alone, leaving the protection of the city wall may not even have the strength to protect yourself. It's better not to get involved in this matter." "Don't be like this, Orpheus. Maybe he can really help you solve this matter," Orig advised on the side. With Orig persuading beside him, Orpheus could only sigh and say, "Since Orig has guaranteed everything for you, let me tell you my story. This is the story of a poor person who did not take care of his only family member and had no wealth." Chapter 6. Second Round Competition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Perhaps because of not sharing it with others for a long time, Orpheus's story is told like an old lady's foot binding, smelly and long, making people impatient to keep listening. After listening for a while, Charlie finally figured out what had happened. After Orpheus and his brother arrived at Ricardon, one night Orpheus's brother, along with several caravan guards and a group of new acquaintances, drank and got drunk. As a result, the group was a group of bounty hunters. After getting drunk, his brother and caravan guards were forcibly kidnapped and disappeared. After his brother went missing, Orpheus disbanded the caravan and frantically searched for his whereabouts around Ricardon. Although he successfully found a clue, Orpheus had no extra money to hire those mercenary groups to rescue his brother. According to the intelligence bought by Orpheus, the temporary settlement of this group of bounty hunters was in a small forest near the village of Caravan east of Ricardon, with a population of approximately 10 to 15 people. As soon as Charlie heard about the large number of people on the other side, he finally understood why Orpheus had been unable to organize manpower to rescue his brother for so long. He pondered for a while and began to consider whether to take on this task. Although he was only one person at the moment, after the competition was resolved, he would definitely buy people to organize his own team. As Orpheus just said, even if he was alone and left the wilderness, it would be difficult for him to protect himself in the face of robbers of more than 10 people. After some thought, Charlie, out of caution, did not immediately agree to take on this task. He decided to wait until after the competitive competition before considering it. The next day is also divided into 2 matches, with the second round held in the morning and the third round held in the afternoon. In the morning, there were a total of 8 contestants participating in the competition, divided into 2 teams. I don't know if it was the boss's intention, but Charlie actually belongs to the same red team as his target, Pagarios. Before starting, the person in charge came to inquire whether Charlie could ride a horse. After receiving a positive response, he assigned Charlie as a cavalry. A team divided into 3 branches. 1 archer, 1 swordsman, and 2 cavalry. Pagarius was also assigned as a cavalry, and he looked proudly at the 3 people in his team. Before starting, he said to the 3, "It's really an honor for you to be in the same team as me. After we start, you must all obey my command. Otherwise, you will bear the consequences." The other 2 quickly nodded and bowed, showing their respect to Pagarius. Only Charlie stood on the side and looked coldly at him. He did not please Pagarius with the other 2, and the latter noticed him as a result. Pagarius looked at Charlie and asked with a sorrowful expression, "Didn't you hear what I just said? Don't you know my identity?" "I know, Your Excellency Pagarius," Charlie replied, thinking to himself, "Anyway, we will end up offending each other severely, and there is no need to waste our emotions and compromise with them now." "Why don't you bow to me?" Pagarius asked. "There are only warriors on the field, no nobles," Charlie said with a smile on his face. "You. Great." Pagarius pointed at Charlie and said, wanting to say something more, but just then, the entrance door was suddenly opened, and cheers outside rushed in like mountains. Contestants enter. Just like yesterday, after the contestants entered the venue, the person in charge introduced them one by one. When Charlie was introduced, some of the audience began to cheer, shouting Charlie's name, hoping that he could perform well again. Due to Charlie's victory yesterday, many people have already placed their bets on him, and some have even opened a new game to bet on how many people Charlie can eliminate today. After arriving at Pagarius, the cheers became even more enthusiastic. Regardless, the fame of the nobility was still greater than that of ordinary people, although many of those who shouted his name may have been bought by him with money. Dong as the gong, symbolizing the start of the competition, was struck, the 2 teams of players immediately entered combat mode. Pagarius, due to his identity, undoubtedly became the leader of the team. He sat firmly on the horse's back, like a commander on the battlefield, commanding his sword and shield to cover the archers and shoot at the enemy. As for Charlie, Pagarius still harbors resentment towards his behavior of ignoring him just now. He directly demands that Charlie launch a charge to attract the enemy's firepower, and he takes advantage of Charlie's ability to attract firepower to launch a surprise attack. Charlie saw his intention at a glance, but he did not speak out to refute it. Instead, he rode his horse and charged out on his own. The equipment used by the cavalry in the competitive race was only a competitive cavalry gun and a shield. This type of cavalry gun was said to be a cavalry gun, but in fact, a spear was more suitable. However, in order to ensure that no one would kill in battle, the tip of the spear was removed, and its position was wrapped in a thick layer of cloth, more like a stick. But this was actually of no use. The thick cloth could not counteract the impact of the cavalry's charge. The enormous impact was enough to shatter a person's bones. Charlie rushed out first, and the two cavalry on the opposite side saw the situation and closely followed suit. Their archers did not replace the target with Charlie. Compared to the moving cavalry, it was easier for the infantry to aim and hit. Kill him. The two blue cavalry soldiers on the opposite side roared and charged towards Charlie, with one of them facing him. He raised his spear above his head, intending to attack Charlie's face and eliminate him in one fell swoop. But Charlie was not so easily eliminated. He imitated the Norman cavalry by clamping his cavalry gun in a creaking pit and facing him with a cold expression. As the cavalry was about to hit him, he suddenly lowered himself, almost pressing his body onto the back of the warhorse. The cavalry gun under his armpit thrust out, hitting the blue cavalry's right torso without a shield. The blue cavalry let out a scream, and he was shot down and fell off the horse. Two warhorses immediately brushed past, and a few seconds later, Charlie sat firmly on the warhorse and rushed to the other side. The back of the warhorse he had just brushed against was empty, with only the injured knight lying on the ground groaning faintly. Charlie's spear almost shattered his fragile ribs, causing him to only breathe out for a moment and not in. Seeing Charlie quickly deal with a blue cavalry, the audience supporting him from outside immediately burst into enthusiastic cheers. Surrounded by the cheers, Charlie kept his gaze fixed on another blue cavalry who had turned his horse's head towards him, raising his spear high in his hand to receive praise from the audience and provoke them. The cavalry, upon seeing this, felt a deep contempt from Charlie. He let out a curse that only he could hear, and rode towards Charlie with his horse. Charlie's expression also became serious as he saw this. He let out a loud shout and rode towards Charlie again. Chapter 7. Threats. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Driving. Charlie rode up and once again pinned his spear under his armpit, stabbing the blue cavalry charging towards him. The blue cavalry quickly raised their shield to block it, but Charlie's strength was higher than that of ordinary people. As he hit the shield heavily with his spear, he heard a loud bang and the corners of the shield were actually shattered by him. The spear did not diminish its momentum, and after breaking the shield, it continued to thrust out, hitting the blue cavalry's shoulder. There was only a crisp sound of bones shattering, and the blue cavalry's shoulder blades were shattered by the cavalry gun. He let out a scream and fell heavily to the ground with the impact. The competition between cavalry is like this: unless it is a shot that fails, the winner is determined in one round, the winner stands out, and the loser can only lie on the ground, groaning in pain. As Charlie defeated two cavalry in a row, the atmosphere in the field became even more lively. The audience shouted Charlie's name again, and his popularity even surpassed the mediocre Pagarios. Pagarios saw the audience showing their admiration for Charlie, and his expression on his face became very ugly. He couldn't accept being overshadowed by a small lowly adventurer. In order to regain the limelight, he let out a loud shout, rode out, and charged towards the only two remaining blue infantry on the field with his gun. Charlie saw Pagarius launch an attack and had no intention of intervening. He held his gun with one hand and inserted his cavalry gun into the soft soil, jokingly watching Pagarius's charge. Pagarius rushed out of the horse and quickly became the target of the blue team archers. He and the swordsmen were in a panic after their two cavalry were knocked out one after another, but they still forced themselves to calm down. When they saw Pagarius charging, they pulled the bowstring and shot towards Pagarius. The arrows used in the arena were also not very powerful, so Pagarius easily took down the arrows with his shield. He drove his warhorse straight towards the swordsman in front of him, who wanted to dodge in a hurry. Just as he dodged, Pagarius seized the opportunity, stabbed his cavalry gun, and hit the swordsman in the chest, directly flying him out. There is no doubt that the subsequent battle was won by Charlie's red team. Although Pagarius followed closely behind and eliminated the two, he did not receive much praise because of Charlie's leadership, which further angered the narrow-minded Pagarius. After leaving the arena and entering the preparation room, he directly approached Charlie, disregarding his aristocratic image. He reached out and forcefully grabbed Charlie's collar, pinned him against the wall, and fiercely threatened, "Kid, I don't care who's behind you. If I were you, I wouldn't be participating in this damn game again this afternoon. I think you wouldn't want to bear the anger of a nobleman either." Charlie furrowed his brow slightly. He didn't answer Pagarius's words, but reached out and grabbed the opponent's wrist, slowly opening his hand again. Pagarius was surprised to feel the force coming from his wrist, watching Charlie pull his hand away, then threw the team uniform onto the chair and turned to leave. "Damn it!" Pagarius cursed loudly. Since he was born, no one has dared to offend him like this. How can this not make Pagarius, who is naturally narrow-minded, angry? In the afternoon, Charlie arrived as scheduled to participate in the third round of the game. The third round was played among the four winners in the morning, and the two of them played against each other. To Charlie's surprise, he was still on the same team as Pagarius. However, in the following battle, Charlie clearly felt the strangeness, and the two opponents they faced deliberately ignored the presence of Pagarius, launching a fierce attack on Charlie. But Pagarius had no intention of coming forward to help. He stood behind and coldly watched Charlie fall into the siege, as if he were a bystander on the sidelines. Charlie suddenly understood that perhaps both contestants had been bribed by Pagarius with that damn money. Otherwise, how could he have dealt with him right away? If Charlie had guessed correctly, if he had been defeated by the two of them, Pagarius would have easily defeated them like a celestial being. If the two of them focus again and prevent Charlie from participating in the last round of the next day's competition, Pagarius will not only easily win the championship, but also step on his head. Good strategy. But how could Charlie possibly be defeated by these two little miscellaneous soldiers? He used his shield to withstand one person's attack, wielding his iron sword to launch a stormy blow at the other person. Amidst the enthusiastic cheers of the surrounding audience, he defeated one person in just a few face-to-face encounters, and the other person couldn't escape, falling right under Charlie's sword. "You have upgraded to level 11." As the last person fell, the system prompt suddenly rang out in Charlie's ear again. He frowned, but instead of directly opening the system panel, he accepted the cheers of the audience together with Pagarius. When standing on the same side as Charlie, Pagarius whispered in a voice that only the two of them could hear. "I have warned you before. Since you are unwilling to listen to me, I can only remind you one last thing. Remember to look at the road at night." After speaking, Pagarius sneered and walked away. Charlie listened to his naked threat, his expression slightly changed, but soon returned to his usual state. No matter how bold Pagarius was, he dared not openly send someone to intercept him in the city. As long as the other party was not prepared to kill him, he had a way to deal with it. In today's game, Orig didn't come everywhere to cheer for Charlie, but he was still thinking about the money he had bet on, so he sent his bartender to bet on Charlie. Perhaps because Charlie's reputation had been established, he found the book garden website www.zhaoshuyuan.com to bet on him, and the money he could earn was noticeably less. As Charlie walked out of the arena, he could hear the excited discussions of the audience everywhere, while some of the participants in the bet were fiercely discussing who would win tomorrow. Upon hearing this, Charlie deliberately slowed down his pace because the players on the field were all wearing helmets that could cover most of their faces, and the distance was too far for the audience to recognize him, so he didn't have to worry about being recognized by others. In my opinion, I should bet on Lord Pagarius tomorrow. He is a nobleman and will definitely win the final victory. That's not necessarily true. Charlie Davis's strength is so strong. What would Lord Pagarius use to defeat him? You're stupid, that must be throwing money at you. The person who spoke first insisted, I didn't see the strange behavior on the other side this afternoon. It must have been bribed by Lord Pagarius with money. I don't think Charlie can escape either. Tomorrow, he deliberately sold a loophole and gave up the championship, still able to win second place. His mother, can you be so headstrong with money? I think Charlie Davis will not be bought, so I bet Charlie wins. Oh, money is just so capricious. The others sneered and agreed, you see, if Charlie doesn't agree to bribe him, with Pagarius' temper, he might have an accident tonight when he walks the night road. Isn't tomorrow's champion still him? Shoo, don't say it so loudly. The person next to them changed their expression and quickly blocked their mouth, cursing, where are you from? If someone from Lord Pagarius hears you, you'll be ruined. Being stirred up by the stunned youth, the others lost interest in continuing the discussion and hastily ended the discussion, each going home. Chapter 8 Is being targeted. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Charlie listened to the whole process from the outside, and what he didn't expect was that even the ordinary audience could see this, and even accurately predicted what Pagarius might do tonight. I don't know if it's because Pagarius is showing too clearly, or if he has a previous criminal record. Thinking to himself, Charlie looked at the bustling streets outside and decided to return to his tavern before dark. In broad daylight, he didn't believe Pagarius would dare to openly attack him on the crowded streets. Along the way, Charlie kept watching behind him and noticed that shortly after leaving the arena, a few suspicious men suddenly appeared behind. They had a fierce appearance and had been intentionally or unintentionally scrutinizing Charlie, following him from a distance. Charlie ignored them, no matter how brave they dared not openly fight on the street, so Charlie returned to the tavern very confidently. He didn't want to involve Orig, who treated him well, so he didn't tell him about it. Instead, he ordered dinner and had the bartender take him to the room. After returning to the room, Charlie began to check the bonus points he received after upgrading. After reaching level 11, Charlie gained some personal attributes and stared at his personal panel for a long time until someone knocked on the door of the room outside before making a decision. 1 effort reduces 10 meetings, 1 path leads to darkness, add to vitality. Charlie Davis, 23 years old, family. Davis character level. LV 11 vitality. 15, oh my god, how did you achieve such a strong physique? If I were you, I would definitely go to the construction site to contribute my strength. Who made me so strong? Control. 5, your control over your body is not very strong, even if you place the target 10 meters in front of you, you may miss the target, yes, you are such a weak chicken, endurance. 5, oh my god, let me see who has such poor endurance, I hope it won't affect your endurance in any aspect. Cunning. 4, come on, the word cunning is completely irrelevant to you. You are someone who cannot lie, listen to me, that's right, social. 8, your social skills can only be described as barely strong, I hope you won't get beaten up for saying a wrong sentence, intelligence. 9, it's just a normal person's intelligence, I believe you still have room for improvement, after all, you don't want to become what others say is a simple-minded man with well-developed limbs, do you? Skills, proficiency. Vitality. 102 with 1 hand, 23 with 2 hands, 62 with a long shaft control. Bow 34, crossbow 12, throw 50 endurance. Riding 90, running 90, forging 0 cunning. Investigation 45, tactics 57, rogue habits 25 social. Charm 80, dominance 50, trading 42 intelligence. Management 49, medical 0, engineering 10. Looking at the updated description of his personal attributes, Charlie's mouth twitched uncontrollably several times, and he had to suspect that there must be a humorous soul behind this system. After closing the personal panel, Charlie's attention was drawn to the incessant knocking outside the door. He jumped up from the bed and took a few steps to open the door. To his surprise, it was not the bartender who brought dinner, but Orig himself. "Orig. Why did you come?" Charlie asked unexpectedly. "I have something I want to tell you," Orig said solemnly as he flashed into Charlie's room. He placed the plate on the table and then said, "Charlie, Antonia noticed a few thugs under Shark Anon wandering outside. That gang has connections with the Pagarius family, and you're probably being targeted." Anon, the Shark. Charlie showed a puzzled expression, and when he saw his expression of doubt, Orig explained to him, Anon's sphere of influence is in a few blocks in the center of the town. He has always supported the Vitranis family, where Pagarius is located, and has done many things for Vitranis. A few years ago, in a competitive competition in Ricardon, a young man who had hoped to become a champion was blocked in the alley by several Anon's henchmen while going out to drink at night. He forcibly broke his foot and wrist, becoming a useless person and unable to participate in the next day because he did not accept Vitrani's bribe. The championship fell on the players of the Witten's family as a result of the competition. Upon hearing this, Charlie couldn't help but take a cold breath and forcefully break his ankle and wrist. No one could bear the pain, and from then on, he became a useless person who could do nothing. If it were in the modern era of advanced technology, he might still be able to barely survive, but in this chaotic world of cannibalism, it was equivalent to being directly sentenced to death. Seeing Charlie's face wavering, Orig continued, "So I want to advise you, to ensure that you can safely go to the arena tomorrow, don't leave your room tonight. I will instruct the bartenders not to knock on your door, so no matter who knocks, don't open it." Charlie nodded and accepted Orig's suggestion, but even if Orig didn't say it, he wasn't the kind of person who would run around at night. Compared to most adventurers, Charlie was simply an outsider. He never went to the kiln with others, nor drank all night, which is why he was often joked about by Beard and his companions. As soon as Charlie thought of Big Beard and the others, he felt a little uncomfortable again. He quickly tidied up his mood, thanked Orig, and chatted with him a few times before Orig returned downstairs. "Tonight's dinner is very simple. A piece of black bread, a small piece of bacon, and a bowl of mushroom soup are all the foods that can fill his stomach. These foods not only have a simple appearance, but their taste is also not very acceptable. Take that piece of black bread for example, I don't know if it's to save raw materials. In addition to wheat flour, it's also mixed with some wood chips and other substances, making it not only tasteful but also difficult to swallow. It can only be eaten with a more peculiar mushroom soup. Salted smoked meat is also equally hard, with a strong smoky smell that can be smelled just by smelling it. Due to the lack of spices for pickling, the whole piece of meat is not only salty during pickling, but also has its own fishy smell. Well, the people here, like Europeans on Earth, have no habit of castrating pigs. The taste of a pig without castration is also indescribable even in modern technology. Fortunately, Charlie has been living here for more than half a year and has become accustomed to the terrible food here. Looking back on when he first traveled here, he couldn't swallow these foods and almost vomited them. In the end, he was able to barely accept them after being hungry for a few meals. Chapter 9. Knocking on the door at midnight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At night, Charlie lay in a deep sleep on the bed in the tavern room. After some time, he was suddenly awakened by a slight knock on the door. He opened his eyes in the dim candlelight and whispered to the door, asking, "Who is it?" "Sir, do you need any special service? For only 10 dinars, we can accompany you for a night to relax and unwind." A gentle woman's voice rang outside the door. Charlie frowned slightly upon hearing this, and he stubbornly refused, "I don't need it. You can go find someone else." The woman did not leave. She still stood outside the door and begged, "Sir, please do me a favor. My sister has not eaten for several days, and I only need 10 dinars at your discretion. Go find someone else, Charlie said stiffly. He was not stirred up by the other person's words, and he still remembered when he was a caravan guard, he heard Big Beard and the others tell a story. Big Beard and the others knew a guy who was tricked into opening the door by a woman at night. After he opened the door, several big men rushed in and forcibly took all of that guy's wealth. This is simply a medieval version of the fairy dance. Seeing Charlie stubbornly refusing to open the door, the woman cursed inwardly. There was no sound left, but Charlie secretly got out of bed. He carefully pulled out the iron sword placed by the bed and walked to the door, eavesdropping on the outside. The sound insulation effect of this door was not good, so Charlie could vaguely hear the deliberately lowered conversation between the woman and several men outside the door. The woman whispered, "This kid didn't hit the nail on the head. We can't force him to break through the door, can we? Just break in and let the people of our Anon gang handle things." "Who dares not meddle in their own affairs without looking long," said a man rudely. "Nonsense, really breaking in and causing a big fuss. It's not nice up there," scolded another person. "What should we do?" "We can't just wait outside like this," said the rude man. "Just wait, I don't believe he can stay in his room all night without coming out." "Damn it, I've never seen such an honest adventurer before," the person said. Charlie breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that the other party was not prepared to forcefully rush in. He was afraid that the other party would come and force him. Although he was not afraid of losing money, if he killed someone in the room, it would be a big trouble. Since the other party was not planning to forcefully break in, Charlie temporarily calmed down and gently lifted the table behind the door to prevent anyone from breaking through. He then lay on the bed, ensuring that he could always get his weapon and close his eyes. When Charlie opened his eyes again, the high crowing of roosters had already sounded outside the window. He opened his eyes and instinctively looked towards the door, only to find that the table he had moved to the back of the door last night was still in place, with no signs of being pushed. It seems that the few members of the Anon gang did not attempt to break in last night. Although they had Pagarius behind them, they also took into account the law enforcement forces in the city and the image of Pagarius. If Charlie was killed by the Anon gang members the night before the last round of the game, it would be a blatant explanation to the outside world that Pagarius had done it. Pagarius participated in competitive competitions to gain a better reputation and glory. If his reputation was tarnished due to Charlie, it would be like picking sesame seeds and losing watermelons. Charlie got out of bed, easily lifted the table, put it back in its original position, and then carefully opened a crack in the door. He looked out for a while, and although the corridor outside was still a bit dim, it was empty, and it was obvious that the members of the Anon gang were not blocking outside. After confirming that it was safe outside, Charlie opened the door and walked out. When he walked downstairs, Orig was still standing behind the counter wiping his glass with the dirty cloth. When he saw Charlie come down, he grinned and revealed his yellow rotten teeth. "Coming down, our future champion," Orig said with a smile, casually picking up the wine jug and pouring it into the freshly wiped glass. "Let's have a drink first. I've already had Antonia prepare breakfast. Today is the last round of the game, so be in good shape." Charlie was used to his glass and walked straight over, but then noticed that Orig's wrist seemed to be injured and his movements were not very convenient. "What's wrong with you?" he asked strangely. "It's okay, we fixed a few thieves," Orig said with a smile on his face, looking insignificant. Charlie shrugged and was about to say something when Antonia walked out of the kitchen carrying food. She happened to hear Orig's words and spat. "Orig found several thieves wandering in the hallway last night. He beat them up alone and injured himself. He didn't suffer too much from the damage." "Huh, I have rough skin and thick flesh, and I'm not afraid of pain," Orig said with a smile. Charlie listened to their conversation and felt a slight movement in his heart. He thought of the few members of the Anon gang last night and quickly asked, "Are those thieves from the Anon gang?" When Orig saw Charlie asking, he gave him a surprised look, as if he didn't expect Charlie to guess. He nodded and said, "It's indeed from the Anon gang. When I found them, they were standing outside your room, and there was a woman inside." Upon hearing this, Charlie recounted what had happened last night. After finishing, he sighed, "I thought those people would stand outside the room waiting all night, but I didn't expect you to be the only one who destroyed the group." Orig chuckled and boasted as he propped up the muscles on his arms, saying, "I have the blood of Pedania flowing through my body. Even if there were a few more bullies, they wouldn't be my opponents." Although Orig said so, Charlie was still somewhat worried that he might offend the Anon gang and cause trouble. However, Orig showed a nonchalant attitude, stating that behind him stood Orcus, the leader of the gang who had equal power in the city of Ricardon and Anon. He was known as a rigid-minded because of his rigid behavior. The relationship between Orcus and Anon is very tense, so if Anon is ready to take action against Orig, Orcus will definitely not sit idly by. Orcus. "It doesn't matter, I will take action." Subsequently, Orig urged Charlie to finish breakfast quickly and they went to the arena together. He was full of anticipation for today's final round of the game and couldn't wait to see Charlie defeat Pegarius in the hall and win the final championship. Chapter 10. Last Round. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The arena is now bustling with people. This is a duel between a newly arrived powerful adventurer and a towering aristocratic master. No matter where it is placed, this topic can attract the attention of ordinary people on the streets and alleys, and is enough to attract attention. Therefore, most of the civilians in the city rushed to the arena, causing it to be overcrowded for a moment. The crowd was crowded, and everyone stretched their necks to look at the empty arena, waiting for the arrival of the two contestants. Charlie didn't go directly to the preparation room. He followed Orig to the outside of a crowd surrounded by people. The crowd occasionally made a noise, and Charlie and Orig squeezed in and came to the table. The table was piled with dinars, and Charlie only glanced at it and knew it was a gambling point. He saw Orig propping his hands on the table and saying to the bloated man sitting, "Now, what's the rate for betting on Charlie Davis?" Charlie Davis. The wrinkled man glanced at Orig and said lazily, 1.1.5, I remember you. You bet on Charlie alone on the first day and earned me 2,000 dinars, his mother. Speaking of this, the man was furious. He thought he had met a fool and didn't want to bet on popular figures to bet on this unknown guy, so he happily accepted his money. But who would have thought that Charlie would actually win in the end, and he lost a sum as a result. Upon hearing that he had earned 2,000, the gamblers around him became agitated, and their eyes towards Orig were filled with envy, jealousy, and covetousness. However, after examining Orig's muscular physique, they still dispelled some of their bad intentions. "Then give me another 1,000 dinars, said Orig, as he was about to throw the money bag onto the table. But the man quickly reached out and stopped him, saying, "Hey buddy, you've already bet enough on Charlie now, so you can only bet 250 more dinars at most." Orig raised his eyebrows and said, "Okay, that's 250. As he spoke, Orig readily paid the money, and after he completed the transaction, he pulled Charlie out of the crowd. After coming out, Orig patted Charlie's shoulder and said, "Charlie, since the first round of the game until now, we have earned 3,550 dinars. Plus the one we just bet on, it's a whopping 39.25. As we agreed in advance, I will give you 30%, which is 1,300 dinars. Charlie nodded, but he didn't refuse. Since Orig had brought up this matter again, it proved that he should have genuinely wanted to give it. So why did he refuse? Anyway, he just needs money now to establish himself in this world. In the high-level viewing platform, Patier, dressed in a luxurious robe, sat on the soft sofa. The guard stood beside him, whispering something. After the guard finished speaking, Patier casually waved his hand and said with a faint smile, "It seems that the people of Pegarius did not succeed in their actions, and they don't know what his inner thoughts would be when he saw Charlie standing safely in front of him, eager to compete with him." I will definitely be very angry, the guard agreed with a smile. I can't wait to see Pagario's incompetence and rage after being defeated, Patier smiled as he spoke. He reached out and picked up the silver-plated wine glass placed on the table, drinking the sweet wine inside in one gulp. As Patil wanted to see, Pagarius was quite angry when he learned that Anand's people had not been able to depose Charlie, and instead he had been beaten hard. He came to the arena with a lot of anger and stood in the preparation room, listening to the cheers of the audience outside, feeling even more annoyed. He kicked over the chair in the preparation room to vent his anger, gradually calming himself down. He realized that he might not be able to defeat Charlie and win the championship of this competition. Although he was a nobleman and had followed the army to fight against enemies on the battlefield, he was also heavily protected due to his identity. Not to mention killing enemies, he couldn't even touch their fur. How could his combat skills compare to Charlie, who made a living by licking blood on the tip of a knife? Thinking of this, Pagarius was filled with frustration in his heart, but he was not prepared to give up just like this. He must win this competitive competition. He instinctively touched the position where several flying knives were hidden on his body. The competition rules did not explicitly prohibit the use of small weapons such as flying knives in the field. Quickly, under the anticipation of the crowd, Charlie and Pagarios rode their warhorses and rode out of the entrance passage to the open arena. This is a battle between cavalry, and their weapons are also a shield and a specially designed lethal cavalry gun. Dong, as the gong, symbolizing the start of the competition, rang out again, the final round of the championship game officially began. Pagarius took the lead and rode his horse towards Charlie. Without hesitation, Charlie kicked the horse's belly with both legs and rushed forward to the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com to meet the former. The two raised their cavalry guns and quickly crossed in response to the cheers of the audience. Charlie's spear hit Pagarios' shield, but did not shatter it. Perhaps due to nervousness or some other reason, Pagarios' spear did not hit Charlie, but instead pierced into the air. The audience immediately let out bursts of boos, and they did not expect Pagarius, as a nobleman, to make such a basic mistake. After passing by, the two riders stopped at the spot where the other had just stood, turned their heads, and Pagarius impatiently patted the warhorse. He was clearly disturbed by the boos of the surrounding audience. But he still chose to take the initiative and mounted his horse again. He raised his spear above his head and thrust it vigorously towards Charlie's head. Charlie quickly raised his shield to block it, while the spear was still sandwiched under his armpit, pointing directly at Pagarius, who was not protected by a shield, driving away. With a loud bang, the cavalry gun hit the shield head on, and Pagarius' cavalry gun actually pierced through Charlie's shield. The gun head, carrying flying sawdust, rubbed Charlie's face and stabbed him, causing him to sweat from behind. Charlie's cavalry gun also hit Pagarius hard because he did not dodge, and then hit him hard, driving him away, hitting his armored rib. Pagarius let out a scream, and his body shook violently, but he did not fall off his horse. The two riders brushed against each other again and changed positions. At this moment, Pagarius's condition was clearly not good. His face turned pale, and he dared not take a big breath for fear of being involved in pain. He could only take a small breath, and his right hand, holding a cavalry gun, was also trembling slightly. On Charlie's side, except for the broken shield tied to his left hand, which caused his tiger's mouth to tremble uncontrollably due to the tremendous recoil, there were no other problems.